Welcome back into Discern. I'm Ross, back with you, and we are joined by Jim Denison of the Denison Forum. Hello, Jim.
Hey, Ross, good to be with you today. Thanks for the privilege.
Absolutely. We've been enjoying having Discern episodes with some of your other teams, members, and associates, Denison Forum, and really great to have you back, though, to talk about a really urgent topic that you've been addressing through your ministry, and then in particular through a new book, which released January 25th, The Coming Tsunami. So we're going to spend these next 4 or 5 episodes really giving our audience a chance to get dialed into these critical issues. And so this book is called The Coming Tsunami. I'm going to start with I'm going to try to catch you, Jim, maybe a little bit different question, or maybe you've heard this already these few weeks as you've been talking about this book. I think a skeptic may say, hey, you're talking about cultural issues, it's urgent. Hasn't it been urgent since, year one? Like, is it really a more urgent time now that creates this pressing need? Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. So glad you started with that exact question, Ross, because it does sound like it's just kind of overstatement to sell books, doesn't it? If I tell you that we're facing the greatest tide of opposition Christians have faced in American history, it sounds like I'm just trying to get headlines. Sounds like I'm just trying to sky has fallen sort of, be sensationalist for the sake of sensationalism. So 2 things to say in response. First of all, until 6 months ago, when I was finishing the work on this book, I have never said those words before myself. Not in 40 years of pastoring. Not in 13 years of this ministry have I ever said that, in my opinion, Christians are facing a tide of opposition that's unprecedented in American history. And then the second thing to say, as we unpack the reasons for the tsunami, the earthquakes that are causing this, I think on the merits it will be clear that what I'm saying is true, that there are, in fact, accusations being made against Christians in America that have never been made in our history. Never before has it become conventional wisdom that Christians are outdated, intolerant, oppressive, and dangerous to society. Never before have we seen something like the Equality Act that we might talk about, so-called Equality Act, which is being called the greatest threat to religious liberty in American history. So really on the merits, what we're facing is something we just simply haven't faced before. Now, very quickly, Ross, I'd want to say, I'm not saying we're in North Korea. I'm not saying we're in communist China. I'm not saying that we're in Cuba. I'm not saying we're facing persecution on that level, but I am saying that we're facing a rising tide of opposition that is new to us in America and that requires an urgent response filled with redemptive hope.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I mean, Discern is a show we've made together to be current and relevant in the culture with what's happening today, and to see it through a biblical lens. So this book is really dealing with not historically, prevalent challenges in the history of Christianity. This book is really talking about what's happening unique to our current culture. If I could ask, and I'm sure you've thought about this, are there things about our current culture that are making all of this more rapid in its development? If we look back, so 10 years ago, we certainly weren't having this conversation. But what kind of time frame would you put around these shifts? Are we going back 5 years, 6 years, more recent?
That's a great question. On one level, I'd go back 30 years. Well, one level, you go back to the 18th century, talk about Immanuel Kant and the denial of truth, which is the first chapter, the first earthquake. But really in contemporary terms, on one level, you could go back 30 or 40 years. You could go back to the so-called sexual revolution of the 60s, which is the second earthquake, second chapter. So you go back that far, I suppose. And a strategy that was adopted at that point to normalize LGBTQ behavior, then to legalize, saw that with Obergefell in 2015, now to stigmatize those who disagree, and then to criminalize opposition. And that's the so-called Equality Act. So in one level, there's a narrative that's been going on for at least that long, 30 or 40 years. But on the other side, this is as contemporary as the social media phenomenon of our day. So there was a day when I published my first several books. I had to go through editorial process with outside publishers. It was 18 months. It was very laborious to be able to do this. I couldn't be on a show like this without obviously having permission from somebody like you and your group. I couldn't get in the newspaper, couldn't get on radio without going through all sorts of filters, right? And editorial and all of that. Today, anybody with a cell phone can go viral. Anybody with a cell phone and a social media account can speak out to the culture. So ideas, and bad ideas as well as good ideas, can go viral overnight in a way that wasn't true 10 or 20 years ago, certainly not true in previous generations. One other thing I would add, there was a day when media made its money by being objective. We've talked about this in previous episodes as well. Walter Cronkite, the most trusted man in America, advertisers knew that they were most likely to get to customers based on platforms that were trusted for their objectivity. Nowadays, with the ability to use analytical tools to get to specific demographics with frightening specificity, now it's possible through digital media especially to know exactly what customer base this advertiser is seeking to reach and then align the message of that media platform to that audience so as to ensure ads from that advertiser. It's how you make money in media today. You don't make money being objective. You make money by speaking to specific audiences and agendas on behalf of advertisers and certain demographic groups, whether it's Fox on one side or MSNBC on the other side or whatever. And that's a pretty recent phenomenon as well. So you could say social things over the last few decades are part of the answer to the question. Personal social media and the way media itself has become so, journalized. There was an article in the Columbia Journalism Review saying journalists are no longer responsible for reporting objective facts because there's no such thing as objective facts. Now there's no difference between the editorial page and the front page. It's all reporting truth as we see it to the audience we're seeking to reach.
Well, and that's really the genesis of this very show, is a personal frustration that I had with not being able to trust objective truth from any one source other than the Word of God. And so if we're talking about things that just happened or what's happening with our government or the systems we're in, it was very difficult to discern what we should be seeing as the truth and then how we should respond as believers. And that's really what the show is about. And so as we talk about the book, The Coming Tsunami, over these next few episodes, what's important to me is the opportunity to really talk about these things that are relatively new. Again, challenges on Christian morals or Christian views or opposition to Christian views is not new. But these challenges are unique, it sounds like, to the last 20 to 30 years, and in some cases to really the last 5.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I would say I'd say you've got that exactly right. And that's what the urgency behind the book is all about. That's why speaking about it in conversations like this is so missional for me, because I believe it's urgent that Christians understand what's happening so that we can act redemptively, proactively before it's too late.
And so this week, we will be unpacking really these 4 critical issues that are discussed in your book, The Coming Tsunami, and it is available at comingtsunami.org, Amazon, and actually, Jim and I were talking before, available on Audible, and actually read by one of the same voice actors who did a John Grisham novel or several John Grisham novels. So in the next episode of Discern, we're going to focus on the first earthquake, which is the model you're using to describe these issues, which is the rise of a post-truth culture. We look forward to seeing everyone on that episode of Discern.